Myo Renge Kyo Nam Myo Renge Kyo Nam Myo Renge Kyo. Hi. So before I continue to finish this Go show, sorry the camera's vibrating, I want to go ahead and plant an idea in your head before I read the rest of it, instead of trying to explain it as I go, although I'll probably do that as well. But there's a very, very, very important point in this Go show. This Go show on the opening of the eyes of wooden and painted images. And what Nichiren is going to get into here is a fundamental of Mahayana Buddhism and you've heard it said, the enlightenment of sentient and non-sentient beings. And so I want to plant this idea in your head so that you can hopefully use it as a co-filter in your mind as you read or listen to me read this Go show and other Go shows. It's a point I've tried to make in different ways repeatedly, but I thought of something different as I read this Go show, that where language fails us, remember too, this is a translation of a translation. So really, when we read these wonderful works, we need to constantly be aware, make ourselves aware that we're looking for the meaning in the words and not get stuck on the words themselves. So let me point this out in a different way this morning, or today. It's morning for me. You may have this memory from childhood or from yesterday or sometime in your experience. I think all of us have had this experience, perhaps not, but I want you to think about it in a different way. Have you ever sat by a body of water, like a lake or a pond, and for just a moment, or maybe many moments, just contemplated the surface of the water, just been sort of mesmerized by it? Have you watched a bee pollinating flowers for an amount of time you can't discern because you lost track of time? Have you maybe had a butterfly land on your hand, or just watched one, or a hummingbird? Have you sat outside on a cold, crisp, bright day and tried to look at the snow, or the unique crunch of snow when you walk in it? The sounds of frogs, crickets, birds, the air, trees and their leaves rustling in different breezes and winds, felt the warmth of the sun and just sort of basked in it for a moment. You've got to be able to find some experience you've had that you can equate with these things that I'm pointing out. What I want you to consider in those moments is that the surface of the water isn't doing anything to you. It doesn't, by its nature, have this spellbinding effect. The wonder of the bee and how it's able to fly, the beautiful resonance of the song of different birds, insects, the wind. the almost otherworldly sensation that huge swashes of snow, white in the brilliant sun, sparkling. These are properties and characteristics of the things, but the movement you feel in your body, in your mind, from those things, does not come from those things. Now you may be saying, well, yeah, Sylvain, we know that. But think about it. Where does it come from? Where does that sense of awe and preciousness and timelessness, where does it come from? I mean, I really want you to think about this, because this is what Buddhism is about. I told you it's morning. I need my coffee. When Buddhism talks about the opening of the eyes, this is what it's talking about. When Nichiren is talking about opening of the eyes of wooden and painted images, he's also going to talk about the enlightenment of plants. And when people generally hear that, we go, what? Oh yeah, my rose bush is enlightened. But that's not what it means. That's what the words say, but you have to understand that those words are said in a context of a much larger meaning. This is why study is so important, because with broad study, you start to gain a different mind. And this is what I'm trying to do to help you. I'm trying to give you an example of the awesomeness of your life experiences and really implant in you, embed in you, the idea that the awesomeness and preciousness and wonder of those life experiences comes from here. They're not happening to you. They're happening for you, and more importantly, of you. This is the crux of Buddhism. If you could live every moment like that, how amazing would life be? That's the Buddha mind. That's why we chant. That's why we practice. We don't practice to get good at it. We practice to keep this precious mind alive and not dormant and get caught up in all of the ridiculous attachments, desires, and cravings that we invent in order to justify being. Just look at being. It is amazing. Just like watching the surface of water. The difference of the air when you're next to it. The sound of it. That's all of life, my friends. That's what Nichiren is trying to talk about here. He's saying that it isn't the image, it isn't the sculpture, it isn't even the gohonzon. It is what we imbue that with, the opening of our eyes of the image, the thing, which is impermanent. The gohonzon is special for one reason, is that it's a pictorial representation of that awe, of a description of that awe. Buddha. Buddha. Okay? So now I'll read it and try to keep in mind that awe. He's talking to 13th century people here, getting them to understand this awe. Because the Lotus Sutra manifests the Buddha's spiritual aspect, the awe. When one embodies that spiritual aspect in a wooden or painted image possessing 31 features, the image is in its entirety becomes the living Buddha. This is what is meant by the enlightenment of plants. So what are the 31 aspects? All of the characteristics and conditions and everything that surface of water, that bee, that flower, the song are not the awakening, the enlightenment. Where's the awakening and enlightenment? Where is the Buddha spiritual aspect? It's our minds. And when the image is entirely becomes the living Buddha, this is what is meant by the enlightenment of plants. We, our enlightenment, our Buddha, our awe, is mirrored, is enlivened, is embodied in those things. But it isn't those things that is doing it. It is we. It is for this reason that Tendai states, quote, all things having color or fragrance are manifestations of the middle way. Commenting on this, Miao adds, quote, however, although people may admit that all things having color or fragrance are manifestations of the middle way, they are nevertheless shocked and harbor doubts when they hear for the first time the doctrine that insentient beings possess the Buddha nature. End quote. Again, those words, read quickly, say, oh, my iris bush, my iris plant, my orchids, they're imbued with the Buddha nature. Read it again. Imbued with, who's doing the imbuing? Not the bush, not the flower, you are. And they are manifestations truly magnificent to behold, but the magnificence that is experienced is your mind, the spiritual aspect of Buddha. Cheng Quan of the Flower Garland School stole Tendai's doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, using it to interpret the Flower Garden Sutra. Then he wrote, quote, both the Lotus and the Flower Garland Sutras reveal the doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. The Flower Garland Sutra, however, is the teaching of enlightenment for people of the sudden teaching. Because it was preached earlier, while the Lotus Sutra is the teaching of enlightenment for people of the gradual teaching, because it was preached later. The Flower Garland Sutra is the root, because it preceded all the others. The Lotus Sutra consists of nothing but branches and leaves, end quote. He puffed himself up like a mountain, thinking that he alone had mastered the true teaching. In reality, however, he did not know about the enlightenment of plants, the heart of the doctrine of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. Miao ridiculed the ignorance of Cheng Quan, showed in the above quoted statement. Our contemporary scholars of the Tendai school think that they alone have mastered the doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, yet they equate the Lotus Sutra with the Flower Garden Sutra or with the Mahavairochana Sutra. Their arguments do not go beyond even Cheng Quan's views, but remain on the same level as those of Shan Wu Wei and Pukung. In the final analysis, when the eye-opening ceremony for a newly made wooden or painted image is conducted by true word priests, the image becomes not a true Buddha, but a Buddha of the provisional teachings. It does not even become a Buddha of the provisional teachings. Even though it may resemble the Buddha in appearance, in reality, it remains the same insentient plant from which it originated. There's the biggest clue as to what I've been saying. Not only is he taking the opportunity in his scholarship to show that inferior teachings are inferior because they don't get this idea that it is our amazed, beautiful Buddha mind that is the complete experience, and therefore imbues all of our environment, the earth, the universe, the stars, with the Buddha nature, because we imbue it with this as we awaken it. But that to look at the object as though it has the power, to put it in a crass way, we completely miss the boat. And once again, we fall into the world of desires. This is our human condition. We want this to give us something. We want that to give us something. We want a great thing to give us something. A great word, a great teaching to give us something. We have it all along. This is why it's called awakening. We don't get it. We reveal it. It's already there. This is because the erroneous doctrine of the true word priest, expressed in mudras and mantras, positions, right, becomes the mind of the wooden or painted image. So it works backwards. Instead of recognizing your own amazing Buddha nature, you do all these hand signals and mantras and stuff, and you imbue those things, and you wait for those things to give you Buddha. It's silly, really, when you think about it. This is like those instances in which the mind causes a person to alter and turn into a rock, as happened with Aluka or Kapila. Unless one who has grasped the essence of the Lotus Sutra conducts the eye-opening ceremony for a wooden or painted image, it will be as if a masterless house were to be occupied by a thief, or as if upon death a demon were to take possession of one's body. When in present-day Japan, eye-opening ceremonies for the Buddha images are conducted according to the true word rite, demons occupy them and deprive people of their lives, for a demon is also known as a robber of life. Moreover, devils enter those images and deprive people of benefits. Another name for a devil is a robber of benefit. Because the people worship demons, they will bring the country to ruin in their present lifetime, and because they revere devils, they will fall into the hell of incessant suffering in the next. When the spirit departs from the body after death, a demon may enter in its place and destroy one's descendants. This is what is meant by a hungry demon that devours even itself. However, if a wise person extols the Lotus Sutra and inspirits the dead person's remains, then although the deceased's body remains human, that person's mind will become the Dharma body. This accords with the doctrine that one can, in one's present form, attain the stage where one perceives the non-birth and non-extinction of the phenomenal world. A wise person who has mastered the perfect teaching of the sutras of the flower garland, correct and equal, or wisdom periods, can bring a dead person's remains into the stage of realizing the non-birth and non-extinction of all phenomena. This is what the Nirvana Sutra means when it states, quote, although his body remains human, his mind will become equal to that of the Buddha, end quote. Chunda set an example of attaining in his present body the realization of the non-birth and non-extinction of all phenomena. If a wise person, enlightened to the Lotus Sutra, conducts a service for a deceased person, the deceased's body, just as it is, will become the Dharma body. This is what the phrase, quote, in one's present form, end quote, means. Then the wise person will retrieve the departed spirit, bring it back into the remains of the deceased, and transform it into the Buddha's mind. This is what the phrase, quote, attaining Buddhahood, end quote, indicates. The words, quote, in one's present form, end quote, represents the physical aspect, and attaining Buddhahood, the spiritual aspect. The deceased person's physical and spiritual aspects will be transformed into the mystic reality and mystic wisdom of beginningless time. This is attaining Buddhahood in one's present form. Thus the Lotus Sutra states, quote, this reality of all phenomena consists of the appearance, the body of the dead person. Nature, the mind. Entity, the true entity of body and mind. End quote. It also reads, quote, he profoundly understands the signs of guilt and good fortune, and illuminates the 10 directions everywhere. His subtle, wonderful, pure Dharma body is endowed with the 32 features, end quote. In this last quotation, the first 2 lines indicate the realization of non-birth and non-extinction of all phenomena, and the latter 2, the attainment of Buddhahood in one's present form. The model of the latter is the Dragon King's daughter, while that of the former is Chunda. Okay, so this is what I want to say to drive this point home in another way. There's a lot of rhetoric right now in Buddhism, Nichiren Buddhism especially, that this Gohonzon has to come through a special ceremony by special people endowed in certain sects or groups with the only provisional ability to make them a sacred image. Okay, I was raised Roman Catholic. Sounds a lot like a pope and a bishop, the only people that can have a real conversation with God, and therefore they're superior to you. And I want to tell you right now, that's a crock of crap. Okay, I'm not trying to insult anyone, but in this latter age, if you learn anything from Nichiren himself, and from all of Buddhism, if you read it all, you'll get this. You don't need me to tell you. We are Buddha. It's inherent in us. So this opening of the eye ceremony is your realization. If you want to get, and these Gohonzon that I provide are digital copies of actual Gohonzon inscribed by Nichiren himself, not some tertiary 700th, 70th generation guy, monk, sect, whatever, who puts his own name and date on there. And I don't want to know him. I want to know Nichiren's enlightenment, right? So that's what this Gohonzon is. It's a Nichiren inscribed Gohonzon. It's a digital copy. And it's important and it's sacred to me. Why? Because when I enshrined it, first of all, a very important ceremony, I enshrined it with abundant daimoku and a full gongyo, reciting the Lotus Sutra and its title, and with my mind imbued it with my Buddha nature, our Buddha nature, the Buddha nature and wisdom. I made this mandala sacred because the opening of the eye ceremony is my eye. It is the opening of the Buddha eye. And the first ceremony I created when I enshrined this is that, basically, as again, I'll repeat, Nichiren said, never look for this Gohonzon outside yourself. So like a flower, like the bee, like the water surface, like the song of the birds, I place this genuine copy, this image of a Nichiren inscribed Gohonzon in an altar that I built and I placed in a sacred place so that I could see and experience my own Buddha nature. Mine. And anyone who comes into this room or into my large school and views that Gohonzon is imbued by me and by anyone else who then comes and joins me with this Buddha nature. Remember, Nichiren said, single-mindedly seek union with the Buddha. This is the spirit with which to chant the Gohanzan. What's that? What isn't that the description of imbuing this mirror with a visualization of my own Buddha nature? All of us? This is the opening of the eyes. This is the awe and timelessness, losing time, if you will, of just being completely overwhelmed by this amazing, perfect, precious moment. You do the opening of the eyes. Somebody else opening the eyes of anything isn't giving you enlightenment. It doesn't come through a channel of imbued people. You're the imbued people. So please, get it out of your mind that this has to come through some special circuitous route. It's your commitment to owning it, to taking care of it, to respecting it, to finding your Buddha nature in it. That is the opening of the eyes. Okay. I'm sure we'll broach this subject again in other ways, but I found that this Gosho especially really takes it head on. And there'll be others, but I really like this one for its simplicity. But it's very easy to get caught up in the words and start going, oh, here we go again. Keep your mind focused. It's very direct if you know what you're looking for. All right? Again, great appreciation. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this. Ask questions, make comments. I love them. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you.